Hey, I'm Deepesh Mandalia, and today I'm going to be talking to you about ban Facebook advertising. No, not ad account bans, not even ad bans. We're going to be talking about broad and narrow audiences. What does that mean? Well, let's jump inside and I'll show you. So when we talk about broad targeting on Meta, what we're specifically talking about is limiting your targeting by region or country, age, and potentially gender, and that's it. There's no lookalikes, there's no interest targeting, there are no behaviors that we're adding on because we're letting Meta do the heavy lifting there. So that's what we define as a broad targeting. Now, when it comes to narrow creative and narrow audiences, this is where the magic happens. Now, let's say, for example, that you're targeting in a competitive niche, and I had one recently where the client I was talking to was trying to target dental owners, dental practice owners at a specific size of business and a specific stage of their business. So as I go through this, I'm asking who are they, what are they interested in, where they at their life stage as well right now. So we know that they are dental practices. We know that we want people with a certain level of expenditure of income and a certain life stage. So we look at this and say, right, how can we target these people? Now, can you target dental practices on Meta using the targeting built in? No. Could you build a lookalike? Yes, but you have to get the data first, and they didn't have the data. So it's not possible to target that directly. Can you target income levels? Well, yes and no. So you can't specifically go in and say, I want people that are making a certain amount of money. Some regions had this previously, but specifically for this, you can't go in. But there are hints as to how you can do this, and I'll come back to that. But just for this example, we're going to say no. Can we target a certain life stage? Now, what is a life stage? A life stage is someone who's meeting a criteria for what's relevant for you. Now, for this particular client, we were talking about pre-retirement. So for these people, you're talking at 35 plus. So for this particular market, pre-retirement means you're at a certain stage where you're thinking more deeply about retirement. So 35 plus was generally this market. Then you look at that and say, yes, we can target that on Facebook. And there was a specific country as well thereafter. For this one, it was Australia. And it didn't really matter whether it was male or female. So we'll put male and female there. And that's the targeting. So you look at that and say, right, there's the setup of my meta targeting. How do I then take this forward? So I can't necessarily target dental practices straight up. I can potentially target based on the other parts. So can I target 35 plus on Meta? Yes, you can. Can I target the country and the gender? So that for me is a broad audience. So when we look at this, that's the basic makeup of a broad audiences. So then we look at that and say, okay, if we can't target dental practices necessarily, then how do we find them on Meta, for example? That's where you start to do your narrow drill down of your targeting. So narrow targeting. Now, the reason I put this on the side, apart from here, so you might say, well, on the left-hand side is that's your audience and that's your targeting. Well, the reason for calling this narrow targeting is that this is all to do with the ad creative. So here, for example, can we call out someone who has a dental practice through the ad creative, which I'm going to say is image or video? And we say, yes, we can. Can we call them out with the ad copy? Yes, we can. So with this in mind, where do we find the targeting for our prospect? Now, first thing you should be asking is, are dental practice owners on Facebook? Now, the way I look at this is not are dental practice owners on Facebook, it's who would be a dental practice owner. So someone who's got that kind of entrepreneurial drive to start their own business, someone who, being 35 plus has probably to an extent with social media grown up with Facebook. So they're more likely to be on Facebook and Instagram. and therefore they may be kind of checking on family and friends and be parts of Facebook groups and things like that, but they might be inspired by entrepreneurship more than necessarily just going to Facebook to see what their friends and family are up to. So the way I do this, and the reason it's called broad audiences and narrow targeting, is that we are trying to find a way to target them when we can't do it naturally through Meta's own targeting capabilities. Now, compare this to, for example, let's say we wanted Shopify store owners. Can we do that? Yes, we can. There is right now, at this moment in time, there is an interest called Shopify. So you could probably surmise that most people that have the interest of Shopify most likely run their own store, could be large or small. Can we get the level of income? Not necessarily. Can we get their life stage? Yes, we can. There should have been a yes there as well. So, let's say right after, same audience, 35 plus, thinking about retirement. Let's say our offer is retirement-based for e-commerce store owners. So that's an example there. So we look at that and say, okay, that makes it easier. So do we need this kind of call out? Possibly, but we don't need to rely so much on our ad creative, because we know to an extent if we target the Shopify interest, then we've got generally the right person, and we can work on the income levels and things like that. And this stage, we look at, let's call it the call out dental practice owners, and we'll call this one the call out of e-com store owners. And we can also go a bit beyond that and say, let's say, for example, revenue is greater than, I don't know, let's just say 500K per year. So that's probably a fairly small dental practice, but let's just say they're making 500K a year. And then let's say for our e-com store owners, we want stores that are making over 1 million a year. So there's two different types of targeting here. Now, yes, even for the e-com store owners, we can target Shopify as an interest. But now let's say we want to target people that are making at least 1 million a year, and even here as well. We still need to use this type of targeting. So broad audiences, narrow targeting. This one, we can call it narrowed audiences, because it's still sizable, but it's not going to be as big. So this is narrowed audiences and narrow targeting. So here we've narrowed it down. Here we need to go a bit broad because we don't know anything about them. Now, the problem with this audience at the top is when you target them, you're not necessarily going to know who's reading it. So there'll be a whole bunch of 35 plus Australians that will look at this ad and it's completely irrelevant, but that's okay, because all we want is the right click from the right person. So how are we measuring performance matters as well. So the number of people that are clicking through is an indication of how relevant your targeting is and how relevant your ad is as well. Now you can make it clickbait and say, hey, we've got the perfect solution for you. They click through to your ad and then they bounce away and disappear. And that's why we don't just rely on click-through rate. We also look at conversion rate as well. So conversion rate is looking at your funnel and click-through rate's looking at your ad. That gives us a good balance as to whether this ad's working. So if we have an ad, it's calling out dental practice owners, making a certain amount of money, and our creative and copy calls them out. And let's say our click-through rate is 1% for the sake of argument. And our conversion rate to the offer, which could be a lead magnet or book a call or whatever the offer is at the end of it, is 0% conversion, then we have a problem to look at. Is it that our ad is targeting the wrong people, or is it that our sales page or our funnel is non-performing? And the same happens, even if you know who your targeting is. But essentially, this is how I go about finding any kind of prospect on Meta. Now, if I'm running this ad, I don't know if I can actually get the dental practice owners to put their hand up. What do I mean by that? Well, even if I target this way, and let's say my ad calls out a dental practice owner, there's no guarantee that they're going to see the ad and then immediately want to interact with me. So then the next stage of this is actually to figure out more about our avatar. So this is a process of developing insights into who you're targeting and why they'd be interested in interacting with you. So let's say, for example, and I'll bring this one out as an example of what we were discussing with this client as well. We have to think about who they are. 35 plus, thinking about retirement, but not generally aware of future wealth planning. Let's just call it that. What's the transformation that we're offering? So here we say, for example, the what ties into our offer as well. So developing future wealth by taking, we'll just say that. So if we look at this, like, who are they? We've got a general definition. What would they be interested in? What's the transformation? Developing future wealth with short and long-term investments. Then we look at what the emotional factors behind where they are right now and what they'd be interested in. So you look at that and say, fear of working until they're 60 plus. So what we're doing here is to try and find some of their kind of deep down fears and concerns as well. If my practice doesn't work out, what will I do for income, etc. Then you look at the logical. I know what investments are, but they scare me. I know I need to save for retirement, but the choices are too overwhelming. So I'm hoping you can see by just seeing this, we're starting to tap into the angles that we can start to use in our ad. So when we come out here and say, call out the dental practice owners, revenue 500K, to an extent, we can kind of lean into this. Now, there's a lot more I would put into this, and I'll do competitive research. I'd also use AI to start thinking about how to plug that in. And, that gives us an idea of how to start to think about reaching the right person, because we want to find what's going to be the most interesting thing for them. So where I said previously, I could maybe target them on Meta and actually get an ad in front of them. How do I get them to click? I have to find the thing that's going to resonate with them the most. And often there's only two things that you're playing with. There's fear and opportunity. That doesn't help. So what do we mean by this? So if I'm looking at this avatar and I say, who are they? What's the transformation we can offer? What the emotional and logical things that they're thinking about right now? When it comes to our ad, let's say we start working with fear-based hooks. One of them could be, for example, let's just minimize that. We could be talking about retirement isn't far away. Have you considered whether you're ready? As an example, it's not necessarily perfect. So with fear, you're trying to get them to look at that and start to panic and start, increase their heart rate, make them nervous, create anxiety, create stress. It's a marketing ploy. It's been used for hundreds of years. It's nothing new. I'm not sharing anything that people are not already using and you're probably already using as well. But fear tactics get attention. Now, let's say, for example, we shift our targeting, we break our audience targeting into two. One is 35 to 50, the other one is 50 plus. So now if I'm targeting a 50 plus dental owner and I say, the creative, the video or the image is showing a dental practice and maybe there's a call out in the creative, or we might have it here and say retirement isn't far away. As a dental practice owner, have you considered whether you're ready? So this I would kind of test and play with, because there'll always be someone comment and say, well, I don't have a dental practice, blah, blah. Fine, you don't need to comment, you don't need to click. And generally that's what we're looking for, because going back to the click-through rate, if you're not the right person, I don't want you to click. The reason I gave the example of 1% here is generally give or take, 99% of people are not going to be a target market. But the goal is that the 1% that click are high converting. That's what we're looking for. So if I'm pulling this out, I'm targeting 50 plus, retirement isn't far away, and as a dental practice owner, have you considered whether you're ready? It's a direct hook and it's a direct hit on something that's quite emotional, just based on this avatar building. So that's fear. Then we can look at this and say, okay, let's test something that isn't so scary. Do you know that 17% of dental owners are already investing in their retirement? This is creating a linked curiosity. So 17% dental practice investing in their retirement. So if I'm again targeting, let's say 45 plus, and I'm going after this, and you're falling into this, and you're thinking, I don't have anything in place for my retirement. I don't really know what's going on. That's going to hook you in. And it says, and many have retired before they are 55. So let's say, for example, I'm targeting, even going back to 35 plus, I could just go 35 to 55 or 35 to 50, 35 to 45, whatever it is. And I could call this in. So this is opportunity based. I'm not necessarily using fear. I'm using opportunity. Now, fear is very close. So when you fear something in your market, when you fear something in your life, is very near. And the more it feels like it's right in front of you, the easier it is to tap in. With opportunity, you're extending the timeline. So you're getting to them to look forward. Opportunity would work better for our audience that's 35 plus, because if you're 35 or 36, there's no fear right now about retirement, because it's kind of just something that'll happen in 20 years time kind of thing. So you're not really thinking about it too much. So if I played on fear with someone like that, it doesn't feel realistic. So it has to feel like it is a realistic thing for you. With opportunity, at 35, 36-year-old, if I'm thinking about 20 years time and I want to bring that timeline forward, same thing happens with mortgages and loans and things like that. If I feel like I can pay that thing off sooner and get rid of that chain around my neck, then I'm going to take that up. So now all of a sudden we've got a couple of different hooks that we can test out. And again, it comes back to the types of audiences that we're playing with. Here, we don't know necessarily who we're targeting. We're trying to pull out those people. For example, it could be countrywide. It could be done by city, for example. And let's say it was by city. So did you know that, and I'll use New York as an example. So did you know that 17% of NYC dental practice owners are already investing? That's a level of personalization that really gets attention. So if you're going with a broad offer, often going to find ways to identify with them and getting them identified in the ad copy goes a long way as well. So again, we're coming back and saying, we don't know necessarily what this targeting is, because we don't have a way of specifically targeting this group. And let's say it's countrywide. I put Australia, but let's say it's US. But just going down, especially in somewhere like US, like New York as a state and New York City as it is, like millions of people, right? So you can still do state-based targeting and still, you could say New York City, you can say New York if it's the state, and still bring in a level of relevance and personalization, because that captures someone's attention as well. So the creative behind this has to match as well. So if you look at fear, retirement isn't far away. As a dental practice owner, have you considered whether you're ready? Now, if I'm looking to project that into a creative, it's going to be a bit doomy and gloomy, not very colorful, some kind of fear-based, but there's also maybe a time with opportunity. If it's this, my creative is a lot more colorful, a lot more welcoming, and I'm extending out a really bright future for them as well. So that's the process I would take to bring in ban targeting for Facebook, which is broad audiences, narrow targeting. And that allows me to literally tap into any niche and to test the market out. Now, the next stage of this, once we've gone through this whole process, is to start testing. So I would create multiple angles and multiple hooks to be able to pull out these ideas and then to run them as an ad. So that enables me to see what works. Now, I've created these during this recording just to show you an example. If I was to test these, I would want maybe another 4 or 5 ideas alongside these. They become my ad angles. I want to test these against certain audiences, the fear-based, maybe my older audience, the opportunity, my younger audience. And I then want to test different creative visuals and different copy angles to see which ones work, because ultimately I don't know. I've been in this game for 20 years in terms of advertising and marketing. I still need to test. I can't just rock up and say, this is exactly what you need to do and this is exactly what's going to work. It's a process. And I'm showing you this process so that you understand that making Facebook ads work isn't as simple as let's just go in and create a campaign, try and do some targeting and put some copy and creative together and just hopefully it'll work. There is a process behind this. This is exactly what I built into my framework, which is called the brand-driven performance marketing. And the reason it's called that is everything we're doing here is considered brand marketing. Who am I targeting? How can I get the communication across? What's the messaging? What's the creative? That's all brand targeting 101. Performance targeting is this little thing here. Click-through rate, conversion rate, micro conversions, and bounce rates and analysis. That I fear is where a lot of people end up focusing too much. So you launch your ads, start looking at the numbers and hope that the numbers tell you what to do. It will tell you where things are going wrong. It won't really aid you in what to do because unless you've got this structure, you won't know. Now, let's say, for example, we've created multiple versions of ads and we've got, let's say, 6 different angles running. Then I'm going to be measuring all of those based on performance. So I'm looking at this and saying, what is my click-through rate? What's my conversion rate? And I'm comparing them all next to each other. So that allows me to look at this and say, well, actually, which one's performing? This one's performing great. This one isn't. This one isn't. And then also, not just in terms of click-through rate, I can measure both. Let's say, for example, that the click-through rate here is poor. The click-through rate here, the conversion rate is good. Let's say, for example, this one, bad click-through rate, this one, bad conversion rate. And just to complete the example, let's just say this one has a good conversion click-through rate, and this one has a bad conversion rate. So what we're doing, looking at here, and obviously you can have good and good as well. We might just hit it out the park and just found the perfect ad. So what do you do in these scenarios? So if the click-through rate's poor, it means that you're not pulling out enough people. But if the conversion rate's good, happy days. Because guess what? Meta cares about conversion rate more than click-through rate. Both are important, but this one's more important. If you're getting more clicks and less conversions, that probably means that either the landing page is poor or the messaging is a little bit clickbaity. The goal would be to have good click-through rate and good conversion rate, and then you'll have ads that kind of flunk on both. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's a complete failure. You might need some kind of adjustment. So when we're looking at this, we're kind of judging performance against each other. So your question may be, well, what is a good click-through rate? What is a good conversion rate? I don't know, because it depends on your market. So what I end up doing is looking at averages. So if we're running all 6 ads, for example, and let's say bad click-through rate is 0.5, this one's 2%, this one's 1.5, this is 0.8, then I can start to judge, are these good or bad? So I'm looking at the averages, and let's say this one is 2% as well, great. Let's say this one's 0.8, then I know where it falls in. So I'm kind of looking at a bit of a cluster here. Same thing happens with conversion rate. So let's say this converts at 2%, this is 0%, this is 0.2, this is 3%. Then again, I can judge these based on performance, and I can kind of measure the performance based on that. What this allows me to do is to continually feed back. So this is a feedback loop. Have I got the right audiences? Have I got the right messaging? If, for example, every single one of these ads was poor and not converting, then I would probably go back to my avatar and my targets and say, maybe I got something wrong. Very rarely does that happen because I spend a lot of time on this. Who am I targeting and how can I get my message across? My avatar building process is actually called the 5W avatar. And the reason for that is there are 5 W's that I'm asking. So who am I targeting? What is the transformation that I'm offering them? Why? From an emotional point of view, would they be interested? Why from a logical point of view? And why not? So when you look at this, what we're trying to do is to determine who's our ideal prospect. And there may be multiple avatars. So there's the 35 to 50 in this example, there's the 50 plus. That's already 2 separate avatars that have different concerns and needs and opportunities. So the who, you generally need to define that as best as you can. It doesn't have to be detailed at this stage. The what is related to your offer. So this really depends on what your promotion is, your product, your service, etc. In this case, it's a wealth opportunity, a wealth creation opportunity. So therefore, the what has to tie in. So developing future wealth with short and long-term investments. Without naming the product, that's kind of generally what they're offering. The emotional wise, I put that here. So what kind of what can you not put a monetary value behind? What is deep in their heart? What really matters for them as well? Then the logical things are, the front part of the brain is thinking about, and they can kind of think about that very logically and put a yes or no answer to it. The emotional ones, you can't really put a yes or no answer. It's a bit deeper. And then we finish off with the why nots. The why nots are the objections, the rebuttals. These are the things that are going to stop people from either clicking your ad or converting. So often when the conversion rate is poor, I know, especially if the click-through rate's okay, I have not handled objections. So at this stage, I'm going into the why not. So for example, and this ties in to the offer. So if our offer is the developing future wealth with short and long-term investments, the why not would be fear of getting scammed, fear of losing their retirement money if it goes wrong, fear of choosing the wrong option and wasting 20 years of their life. So they're all things you must tackle. So for example, if I'm now writing this copy, and then I would start talking about it. So you're probably worried about making the right decision now for the next 20 years, or you're probably worried about, can I trust XYZ? So they're all things that I'm sprinkling into the ads and definitely putting into the landing page, because at that point you don't want to leave any open-ended questions unanswered. So that's the whole process that we go through, and that's the power of the 5W avatar, which I'll be sharing in a separate video. But for today, it was all about broad audiences and narrow targeting that allows you to identify almost anyone on Meta ads by putting the weight of the targeting into your ad copy and your ad creative by using this avatar process.